Fortunately, the size is about right for what we'll be making. Hannah grinned as she held up the metal. Claire looked at the large stack of metal, trying to figure out how they should proceed. Going over to the stack, she lifted it up and put it under one arm. If it was before we entered the underground city, I definitely wouldn't have been able to carry such a heavy load so easily under one arm, she thought to herself. Addressing Hannah, Claire said, "Why don't each of us take half of the stack?" She lifted the metal slightly to indicate it. "This way we can both gain practice." Hannah's eyes looked at the metal before looking back at Claire. "Aren't you afraid I'll make you look bad with my inherent skills?" She grinned teasingly at her friend. Not being able to help it, Claire returned the grin. "That sounds like a challenge." "Winner buys dinner?" Hannah jutted out her chin challengingly. "What do you say?" Okay. Claire nodded. "I accept." The two of them returned to the main area where the blast furnace was located, which also had their forge and other tools useful for their work in making the daggers. Hannah set down the steel and made her way to the coke to put into the forge. She dragged the container filled with coke and began putting it on top of the forge. The coke was positioned around the center where they need to start the process. While Hannah was preparing the coke, Claire went over to grab a container and headed to where the coal was located. Setting the container on the ground, she began filling it up with coal. Once she had enough, she went back to the forge. Before putting in the coal, Claire grabbed some tinder and organized it to light easily. Dragny had provided them with bark that was easily flammable when lit, helping them to start a forge. Claire used a flint striker, specially designed for crafting tools. Putting the striker near the bark, a simple squeeze caused a shower of sparks to occur. They easily ignited the bark, so Claire began putting coals on top of the small fire. Stepping on a bellow connected to the forge, Claire forced air into the fire. The air made the flames drastically increase in size with the added fuel. Slowly, the coals caught and the fire became a decent size. Continuously, Claire put weight on the bellow to make sure that the heat was rising and ready for the coke. When she thought it was good enough, she said, "You can start piling on the coke." "Got it," Hannah answered as she began piling on coke on top of the fire. There was so much coke that the fire was hidden, though the occasional flicker of flames between the coke indicated it was still alive. Claire maintained a steady tempo, pushing more air into the forge. Each time the fire got larger, Hannah piled up more coke. After significant time had passed, the forge was ready for the steel. With Claire stepping on the bellow, Hannah grabbed a piece of steel and stuck it inside the coke with the slanted side first. The machine had cut the steel at an angle, making it easier for them to forge daggers. When Hannah thought enough time had passed, she pulled out the steel and saw that it was white hot. Grabbing a hammer, she carried the metal to an anvil and began hammering with only a few strikes needed to make the tip into a proper point. She then moved on to the lower section that was heated. With Hannah working on her dagger, Claire stepped off the bellow and went to grab her own piece of metal. Sticking the steel into the coal, once again she stepped on the bellow to raise the temperature of the fire. Hannah returned to the forge and stuck her dagger back into the flames. Pulling out the steel, Claire saw that hers was hot enough. Seeing that Hannah had left the hammer hanging on the anvil, she went over and grabbed it. Setting the metal on the anvil, Claire began hammering the steel.